ES Audio.
The Evening Standard Rugby Podcast with Lawrence Dallaglio.
Hello there, I'm Lawrence Dallaglio. Welcome to the brand new season of the Evening Standard Rugby Podcast. Our full episodes start back next week, but with so much going on in the build-up to the Rugby World Cup, we thought it would be a good idea to bring you a little mini episode to kickstart proceedings. So I've managed to rope in Steve Cording from the Evening Standard to join me for a little chat. Steve, how are you, my friend?
Very well, Lowell. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. I came back from a little break in Italy with my father to witness England's performance on Saturday at Twickenham. And you were there with our producer, Julie. How was it for you?
It was a strange day. I mean, I've never known Twickenham Centre itself to be so quiet before a game. I think that was largely because obviously it was only half full. There seemed to be a bit of a party atmosphere when we got in there. And England, I thought, for the first 10, 15 minutes, looked on it, looked sharp. Alex Mitchell was directing things, quick ball. And then it rained and everything just seemed to revert to type. England just started kicking the ball away, missing tackles. The crowd were getting more edgy. I mean, fair play to Fiji. I mean, moment in their history, but certainly not the send-off that England wanted before they go away to the World Cup. As an England fan now, we're looking for some hope from somewhere. I mean, I don't know if you can give us any.
Well, it's I don't like to compare and contrast because, you know, now's the time to sort of get behind your team, whichever one that might be. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of negativity around the England team, a lot of question marks around the coaches, the players. You know, the confidence is at an all-time low. I guess the question for all England fans is, have we reached rock bottom yet? You know, we're ranked 8th in the world. Fiji have jumped above us. Can you believe with that victory over England at Twickenham? And I guess what it has done very abruptly is manage everyone's expectations on England's chances of winning the Rugby World Cup. You know, whereas before fans were looking at maybe a quarter-final against Wales or Australia, I think on the evidence of what we've seen in the warm-up games and you know, we can only go on facts, not fiction. I think we'd be delighted to even qualify out of the group. So, you know, I mean, I think England, you don't deserve to be talked about in the knockout stages if you're losing to teams like Fiji and Argentina last year. So there's a lot of repair work to be done. I'm sure there's been a lot of very honest conversations. You know, the man in the street has been asking me, you know, what's going on with England? Is Steve Borthwick the right man? Well, the reality is he's inherited a squad and a setup and with a lot of problems post Eddie Jones. This is not an overnight fix, but it's also not an overnight problem. England have been, in my opinion, in steady decline since 2019. We've won 2 out of 5 Six Nations games for the last 3 years. You know, it's tough. I mean, I just, please don't think I'm a doomsday merchant, but if I look at the facts, you know, England have played 13 games this calendar year. We've won 4. And lost 8 and drawn 1. I'll run into the Rugby World Cup, which is supposed to give the players the kind of chance to get rid of the rustiness, to get those lungs open and understand what it feels like to be playing. We've lost 3 to Ireland, Wales and Fiji and narrowly won 1 that potentially we could have lost at home. So we're doing a very good job of hiding or keeping our best rugby for the World Cup. And maybe Steve and the coaches have got a trick up their sleeve, but I've got to say that that opening game against Argentina now is absolutely massive.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot made of 2007, which obviously last time the World Cup was in France, you took part in that. I had the misfortune of going to watch England against South Africa in the Stade de France, the first game, and we lost by 40 points. Do you see any comparisons with that? Is there anything that this current squad can do themselves in terms of turning this around? Is it down to them?
I think it's down to the coaches and to them. But do you know the thing that has disappointed me the most is, look, we've all been in teams that have lost games. You know, I'm not one of these players who retires, goes on to, you know, the media and then forgets the fact that he ever played a game that he didn't play well in. I played some shocking performances myself and I captained teams that probably lost in games they shouldn't have done. But what I was prepared to do was own the performance. I feel like there's a bit of a siege mentality within the England team. Um, it's like they believe that the media and the general public, aren't behind them. Of course, they're behind them, but the tweets of two of my favourite players, Ellis Genge and Joe Marler, displays this kind of siege mentality. And I just want the players to own their performance. Steve Borthwaite has come out and tried to make sense of what was a shocking performance. But really, the RFU and England seem to withdraw further and further away when actually what the English public and England fans need is an explanation from the players. There's nothing wrong with losing a game of rugby. It happens every now and again. But you do front it up. You do come out. You apologise to the nation for your performance. You apologise to everyone involved. And then you get it right in training and you come back stronger. And I don't see that with this England team. I think the players, I think they've got that within them. But whoever's telling them or whoever's in charge of their kind of PR campaign, I mean, you've only got to look at the stadium at Twickenham. The All Blacks played South Africa and it was a packed house. Quality of rugby was top tier, top class, even though it was a little bit one-sided, surprisingly. But the stadium was full. I mean, we're not in Durban and we're not in Auckland, we're in London. And I know there's a lot of South Africans and New Zealanders in London, but the stadium was full. You contrast that to England-Fiji, 2 weeks before the start of the World Cup. That stadium should have been packed. And that tells me a lot of things, and some people might disagree with this, but I don't think there is that connection at the moment between the public and their team, because if it was, that stadium would have been packed to the rafters and England would have produced a performance to match that. So there's a bit of work that needs to be done. But equally, it's not a short-term fix. I don't think England will win the World Cup. I didn't think that before the warm-up games. But what they do need to do is put in a series of performances that show that they want to be part of this team going forward and get the fans behind them.
Yeah, well, we'll take a much closer look on next week's episodes at who we think will win the Rugby World Cup when it kicks off. It's a week on Friday now, isn't it? With mouth-watering game between France and New Zealand. But obviously, we all know this year it's now 20 years since England actually did win the World Cup in 2003, one of your greatest days. We've heard a lot of stories from that time, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. But Lawrence, tell us about the book that you've been writing, The Boys of Winter, which comes out this week, which is telling that story of that 2003 triumph.
Yeah, indeed. The Boys of Winter. It was written by Owen Slott and coloured in by myself. And listen, it's a trip for England fans. It's a respite from the doom and gloom that we're currently experiencing. It's hopefully a trip down memory lane. As you say, it's the 20-year anniversary. The best ideas are begged, borrowed and stolen, but there was a famous sports book called The Boys of Summer, written by Roger Kahn about the Brooklyn Dodgers winning the World Series in the 50s. And 20 years later, Roger went to interview all of the old has-beens who played. So I did exactly the same with Owen. We went to see 31 players all around the country and a few on Zoom. We interviewed all the coaches and management staff, the senior coaches, and really the book has two parts to it, to be honest. The first part is looking back at the 9 weeks that we spent together in Sydney, culminating in that World Cup final drop goal and win, and really asking the players for their reflections, because as time passes, people will talk a little bit more. Maybe their perspective on their own involvement is slightly different. And the second part of the book, which I think is the far more interesting part, is do you think it was a good thing that we won? And how has it changed your life? Because when you do win a Rugby World Cup or you win a World Cup, you don't suddenly retire and your life's over. I mean, obviously there is a certain level of contentment there, but you do have to move on and move forward. And I mean, give you a few examples. Johnny Wilkinson, didn't play for England for 3.5 years after that drop goal. Martin Johnson retired almost instantly. I had a week off and then was back playing rugby and went on to win the European Cup and the Premiership title with Wasps. So it's been a fascinating journey of discovery for Owen and for myself. Great to meet up with all the players and coaches. A very special bond between everyone. And hopefully we've unearthed a few little nuggets, because there's been so much written and said about Clive Woodward and the team and coaching staff and everything. and some of it's factually correct, but this is really the player's perspective 20 years later, and listening to some of the lesser high-profile players, if you like, sort of revealing some of their own thoughts and anxieties and feelings and emotions in the build-up to what is still remains the greatest day in England's rugby history. And I guess there's a little bit of legacy there. I'm somewhat disappointed. I'm not one of these players that wants England to never win anything so that we remain in the headlights of 2003. The reality is we've been in 2 finals. Somehow we've managed to not get over the line, but I'd like nothing more than England players to have that feeling of winning that we were able to have in 2003. So it's available in all good bookshops and online and in audio on the 31st of August, which I think is now, isn't it? And hopefully it gives everyone a bit of a lift and a little bit of insight into some of the, in my opinion, some of the greatest players that ever played for England and ever played a game of rugby.
Yeah, you say you obviously you learned a lot about some of the players that you played with in that squad. Was there things that you learnt about yourself that you didn't realise at the time, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. I think, listen, what we understand is that we all had a common objective, but we all came at it in a very different journey. And, what was right and good for me was not necessarily the same for other people. And it's a moment of time in your lives. The success that we had wasn't overnight. This was a group of boys, of men, of coaches, of players that spent the best part of, 6 years together, really. We had the disappointment of 1999, where we were kicked out of the competition by South Africa. The RFU retained confidence in Clive Woodward and us, and really from 2000 onwards, we grew as a group, and eventually we managed to achieve our objective and win the World Cup. And I think what that tells you and us is that if you trust a group of people and you're consistent with what you tell them and what you do, anything and everything is possible. So it was a very special day. I still have fans and friends who stop and talk to me about the fact that they were in their rugby club at 10 o'clock in the morning, drinking and enjoying England's success. But boy, did we make it hard work. I mean, England have won 3 World Cups, one at football in 1966, one at cricket in 2019, and of course the Rugby World Cup. And all 3 of them went to extra time. So we do like a drama in England, don't we?
Yeah, it was a good morning. I do remember that. I was at Staines Rugby Club and then spent the entire day out in Twickenham. It poured with rain all day, but I don't think I've ever seen so many happy faces as there were that day. So, it was certainly something to remember.
Well, Steve and myself will be back next week, along with the whole team, when the podcast returns in full. We'll be joined by Sarah Elgin and the Evening Standard rugby correspondent, Nick Purawal, who will be on the ground in France delivering updates directly from the England camp. Plus, we'll have a very special rugby guest joining us each and every week. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any episodes during what promises to be an amazing and exciting Rugby World Cup. And we will see you on Tuesday.
The Evening Standard Rugby Podcast with Lawrence Dallaglio.